everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name's David Edgar. I'm your host, as always, and I'm joined this week by two of my favourite podders who were available today. First of all, it's the splendid Mr. Cammy Bell.
David, thank you for asking me onto the flagship. Always a pleasure to be speaking to you.
Just for anybody who's listening into this, this is not the former Rangers goalkeeper Cammy Bell, because I noticed a couple of Cammy's quotes from a previous show ended up on the internet being attributed to the former Rangers goalkeeper Cammy Bell. This is the original Cammy Bell, the one who's been on Heart and Hand since 2010. So just in case the former Rangers goalkeeper Cammy Bell hears that he's been saying certain things he hasn't. Also joining me to complete the triumvirate today is James Forrest. No, not that one. Hello, James.
Hello, David. Hello, Cammy. Thank you for that wee amendment in there, David. Yes, it very much applies to me as well, in a much more serious manner. So thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, so if anyone's listening, their names are similar to, if anyone, journalists are listening, their names are similar, but it's not those people. So let's just get, and I'm not the former Canadian international nor the playwright either. The BBC once phoned me up. I think, they've got like a list of names for people who've ever contributed in their shows. And they once phoned me up and asked if I had any thoughts on the National Theatre employing a new director. And I said, well, no, but, I'm willing to give it a go. But yeah, it turned out they wanted the playwright and not me. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. Let's talk Rangers, because there's plenty to talk about this week. And we'll get to the match in a minute, but it would be remiss, I think, not to start with something we were all talking about on Thursday, Friday of last week. And that was, of course, Castore. Some really bad stuff coming out about Castore. Now, there's been problems, as we all know, with delivery of certain strips, and there have been quality issues on some of the kits. Castore brought out a statement last Thursday night, but the real damning one was, of course, that it appeared a couple of school jumpers had been bought and had Rangers crest and Castore crest ironed onto it and then sent out. Now, my take on it is that Castore, have taken on this enormous contract that they had no experience of doing. And despite repeated warnings, they're not the first, they won't be the last. Nobody gets the size of Rangers until they're experienced in it. And that can happen. There is a global pandemic going on. COVID is an issue. Absolutely no doubt about that. But rather than just admitting this, and just coming in and saying, do you know what? We've been caught on the hop. However, we're going to learn. These are the mistakes that we understand we've made. We're going to. I think they're trying to corporate speak their way through it, Cammy, and I don't think you can do it. When you lose the trust of a customer base, you're not going to get it back by corporate speak. You'll only get it back by admitting it in the first place and then telling them what you're going to do to fix it. Just trying to say that it's business as usual with a few glitches ain't going to cut the mustard. No,
and I when I said about the school jumper thing, I think it said in our
that
Patreon
was a fucking
network,
disgrace.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. And I think it said in our Patreon network that is in itself unacceptable. And I'm not excusing the rest of the things, because I think in some aspects of it, Castore have made some real legitimate mistakes. Particularly around the customer service kind of stuff as well, but we'll spin back to that. The challenge that you've got with this, I think, is that they had the water was up to their neckline, and as a result of that, they had to get in a third-party manufacturer, which they hadn't used before, probably hadn't done some quality check on it, and they just rushed to be able to try and get it out, and that's where I suppose the real mistake is here, that it feels a little bit to me like Castore have tried to get to a point where they want to somehow match the demand. Which, and I do want to caveat that, David, by saying it has been overwhelming. No one would have said 2 weeks plus after the shop opening, you're still going to have to wait an hour to be able to try and get into it. I mean, that is unprecedented. Now, where Castore should have done this is said, look, we need to take this one step at a time and just be able to make sure that we line ourselves up properly and understand what it is. But it's a new relationship. They've been caught on massively on the hop, which, despite as you say, a number of warnings from ourselves and other prominent fan media. You can't smoke test these things. That's not an excuse. They have to be able to make sure that they do it right. And I think the Rangers support want it done right. They don't want it done quickly. And we're all reasonable to an extent. So we would have waited for new things to come out, a delay and strips, a delay and all the new lifestyle stuff. If it meant fixing the problems that had occurred at the beginning. They've had some huge successes, Castore, but where they've had epic failures, they've been epic.
Here's my worry, James, is that for some fans, understandably, it's gone too far now and they won't get it back. And it's difficult because you lose the trust of people. It's very, very difficult to get it back. But you've got to try to get the trust back. And unless you start from the position of we've cocked up in certain places, Cammy's right. The support are reasonable. We don't have a moan and we're allowed to, but we would understand. But I think just this trying to brazen it out a wee bit, that's not going to work. And they've got to understand that whether or not they agree with it, that's irrelevant. It's, customer is always right. It's a case of this is the perception now. And whether you feel it's valid or not doesn't matter. You don't get to control people's perception of you. What you get to do is try and work on it and try and change it, but you don't get to tell them their perception is wrong.
For all of us, really, bringing Castore in was turning a page and a new chapter when it comes to the kind of retail side of things, because for a number of years we've had even worse issues. Now, Castore's certainly a better place to be in now than where we were before, much so. But for
you can only play that card once, and I think
exactly.
you played it. Yeah, I agree. But you can only say it's not Sports Direct, and that's true. And it is a better deal for Rangers, absolutely. But you can only play that once, and it's been played.
And the issue is there are still people who have placed a pre-order back in July, and they've still not got their top. They still don't have their pre-order top. Now, for those people, it's been nothing short of shambolic, because the customer service side of things is non-existent, and it feels as though they didn't think that they would need to get something firmly in place for a situation like that. Which, given, and you're saying about COVID and all that, again, that's only an excuse you can take so far, because all companies are trying to kind of adapt to that, and the vast majority have found ways to adapt to that. I still think there is, and it's interesting looking online and talking to people online as well. It's not just one specific issue with Castore, it's a wide range of different wee tiny issues here and there, things that are endemic of a company that are kind of breaking into a new market and they haven't maybe thought this through properly. Now, I still think there's a lot of really, really good things when it comes to Castore. I genuinely do. And I totally get if there's some people out there who think it's really, this is just absolutely shambolic and I really don't want anything to do with them. But you don't learn unless you make mistakes. And it's really annoying for people that have suffered as a result of the mistakes. If the same issues happen next season, then that's a really, really serious point. The issues that have happened this time around, when it's come to pre-orders, when it's come to trying to, put an iron on bloody badges onto school jumpers, X, Y, Z, you can't have that happen again. If it happens again, then that's simply unacceptable. So they really do need to learn quite a few things.
I take your point, but you don't learn unless you acknowledge mistakes either. If you dig yourselves in and say it's a sin for us, and you feel sorry for yourself, and you put your back up, then you're not going to learn. And the relationship becomes confrontational. The relationship becomes poison, and we saw what happened with Sports Direct, and nobody wants that. We just want a normal frigging kit deal.
The problem that you've got with the way how it's set up at the moment, David, is that it feels like every 2 minutes when you log on to social media, you see some next form of Castore bashing, which is on there because, a strip is turned up, it's not turned up, it's turned up with the wrong print on it, it's turned up with things missing on it, it's a school, all that kind of stuff. And you see all that, but the problem you've got is you have to see that in social media because Castore are not acknowledging a better a better mechanism to be able to deal with that from a customer service perspective. Now, touch wood, I'm fortunate. I've only bought a couple of things, right? So I'm not saying that I've got every time. I'm not you, right? So I don't have loads of stuff that's sitting there that I could say, yeah, all of my stuff is brilliant quality, and it's never. Because if my stuff fell apart, I'd be pissed off, right? I spent a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. All of the kits, whether they're training tops, home, away, third, whatever, they're all expensive. You're buying them for the kids, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's money going out the door. But where Castore have failed here, and this is, I think, for me, point number one is get better at doing the customer service side of things so that people aren't having to go public in terms of voicing how pissed off they are. Because our friends across the city are going to be pissing themselves with this. And at the end of the day, this is what you want to make sure is happening, that they do realise this. My hope is that the relationship has had a stumble, but it's not completely broken with the fans who have been disappointed. And the ball is now firmly back in Castore's court to get these things fixed, to address it and learn. And that is the underlying statement, learn.
Yeah, my... and that, this is just based on me, as I wonder, because you can't prove this, it's just a suspicion. Two young guys, never had a bump in the road so far, all positive stuff as they've been building their business, get the biggest challenge they've ever faced, and they're not handling it well, from an emotional point of view. And if you get that wrong, then it spreads throughout and down. So, the kit issues all need to be resolved. You need to get better at customer service, and you need to get better and more honest. It's actually an easy thing to do at PR. We're not asking you to employ a PR firm who goes out and reshapes your image. We're just asking you to be honest and say, yep, we've cocked up here, but here's what we're going to do to fix it. And if you do that, then you might turn it around. But I don't think that there'll be a lot of hope for turning it around if they don't. But we will keep on it. We'll keep monitoring it, folks. People asked us, we did ask for an interview last week. They're always available to come on. They're always, welcome to come on and do an interview with Heart and Hand. And we will ask them all of this. But at the moment, what we were told is that they are spending... basically, they don't want to focus on anything other than fixing the issues. But... we need to see some evidence of that, and we need to see results. Speaking of results, let's move on to a victory against Kilmarnock on Saturday. Rangers winning 2-0. Goals in the second half from new boy Kemar Roth, and from, I'm not telling Jimmy Bell, he spelt that wrong. As one of our listeners said to us, if Jimmy Bell says the boy's name's Roth, his name's Roth. And the brilliant Ryan Kent gave us the victory. Now, before the game kicked off, Cammy, the big news was in a 20-man squad, there was no place at all for Alfredo Morelos. He didn't make the 20. The manager said his head's been turned, he's not trained well. He's basically, from what we can infer, don't want to put words in his mouth, this is me speaking, that he wasn't at all happy with his attitude or his performance in training last week. Initially, there were some reports that, or suspicions that he'd refused to play online. That's not true. He hadn't. He was available for selection. He just wasn't selected. Now, that's not to say that he didn't, that he covered himself in glory at training last week. Obviously, he didn't. And news today, the Monday, that Lille are back in. I think now this has gone past a situation where he can stay. I think that we've got to get a deal done.
Yeah, absolutely. What I do want to do just before we get into that detail, David, as well, is to also kind of re-emphasise what you said there, was that this isn't Morelos now refusing to play. It is about Gerrard thinking that he's not in condition to be able to try and do that. It's not physical, more mental. And listen, do you know what? There's probably a lot of merit to it. I would also like to give kudos to the mad mental Celtic fans creating stories on WhatsApp about Alfredo Morelos apparently playing dodgems in the car park and damaging loads of players' cars. It's just brilliant, some of the fantasy that these people come up with, because it's total bullshit. But as per, Celtic fans love talking about Rangers and wherever they can stir the pot, wherever possible. I think it was the right thing to do. I sometimes criticise Gerrard because I think that he does put a lot of his selection decisions on how players have trained. But in this, I'm 100% behind him, because I think that if Alfie hasn't been given 100%, what kind of message is that? Is just to say, yeah, well, you're going to start regardless. I don't think that he has been himself in terms of what we've seen recently. I'm not saying that he's played badly. I'm not throwing him under the bus like that. But what I would say is that when you're preparing for a big game, and all of our games are big games at the moment because we want to continue the great start that we've had to the season, then you are going to have to make an assessment based on where that is. And if that's not working because that player is not applying themselves appropriately, then their place is at risk. And well done to the manager for having the balls to make that decision, because I know a lot of managers wouldn't have, and they would have played him regardless. So it was a surprise to see it, but I think, with the benefit of hindsight, absolutely the correct decision.
James, he did change the team up, something that I think we've all had issues with in the past. There was 4 changes to the team, and there was a kind of slight tweak of formation, because we have played a 4-2-3-1 this season, but Ryan Kent was given much, I thought, was put more centrally. Yanis Hadji was dropped to the bench. Ruth and Itten came in. Itten played out kind of wide right in the first half, which I didn't think suited him at all, but went into the middle as a kind of traditional striker in the second half, and I thought showed some signs of linking up well with Kemar, Ruth. And Stephen Davis came in for Glenn Kamara. He did reshape the side. Brandon Barker was probably the surprise inclusion, but I thought that on top of the team being changed, one of the things that I complain about with all managers is that if you just change light for light, you're maybe ignoring a base issue, which is it's maybe not the personnel, it's maybe the system. He did clearly tell them more crosses, get it forward quicker, and more shots at goal.
Yeah, but I think the issue we maybe had in the first half was we were almost trying to kind of find our feet with that, because I thought the shots that we had in the first half, they were far too far out to really cause the Kilmarnock goalkeeper many issues. That was a frustration. Another frustration was, yes, we were crossing more, but half the time when we were crossing, it was either a ball that there was no chance that Cedric Itten was going to get his head onto, or Cedric Itten was about 15 yards away from the box itself, and therefore it seems utterly pointless to try and play balls in that are absolutely ideal for the Swiss target man, and him not being there in the first place.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. For the Swiss target man? Sorry, I didn't realise that we'd brought on the fucking tabloid journalist here. What the fuck was that?
Yeah, the power forward.
The Swiss all right, Graham Hunter, thanks very much for that. This is why people want to punch your voice. Things like that.
But in any case, the distribution was tricky in the first half. I thought there was more intention in terms of trying to get shots on goal, obviously, but they were limited to shots from deep, as I say, which I thought was a frustration. But I give a lot of credit to Gerard for, in the second half, clearly recognising that was an issue, and we changed it and we got a lot better, and we mixed up the way that we were bringing the ball in from wide, and that really, really helped us. And ultimately, that's what got us the lead. And once we had that lead, we were very settled, because the one thing that we're noticing is our defence is so secure now. It's record breaking in terms of how secure it is, and there's a lot of depth there with that as well. So very, very happy with that.
Cammy, I have to say that I thought that the English goth Ryan Kent was brilliant. He was clearly given a lot more responsibility by the Scouse football manager. I'll stop now, James. Steven Gerrard, and he has been brilliant so far this season. He has been. I do bully him, don't I? I mean, I'm a bad person.
Yeah, well, you are a bad person, and you're a bully.
I am a bad person. Yeah, that is true. But now, the reason that we bring this up is, of course, he's been strongly linked with Leeds United. They're apparently coming back in for another bid. And look, I get the situation in Scotland with anyone when big money's being offered. You have to look at it. We get the financial realities, but he's in my cannot sell list. I think we all know he's such a talented player, But he is happy at Rangers. He's not in the slightest bit agitating for a move. He loves it here. He showed last summer how much he wanted to come here. He knows that he's the main man, especially if Alfie's going. And he's reveling in it. I don't think that we can afford, at this moment, to let Ryan Kent leave.
So I think the talented young winger, am I just following the same flow as this?
Where's he from?
Yeah. The English winger.
Oh, just jump on the David bandwagon, why don't you, Cammy? God, you have no...
I'm not jumping on a David bandwagon. I'm jumping on a Billy and James bandwagon, and that's something which, frankly, sells out every single time there's a trip. However, I think it's interesting to see where Kent probably had a little bit of a free roll. There you go. I'll bring in another football cliche within that, because he is going to create a chance or provide you with a quality cross, which very few players in Scotland and potentially within the UK actually can create for you out of nothing. And there was one opportunity in the first half, David, excuse me, where he's coming inside just from the left-hand side of the 18-yard box. Looks like he's going to cut in and drive in on his left, and he does this one, Kevin Thompson in commentary called it a chop, where he just literally moves the ball out from under his feet, and in one swift movement, he's then been able to create the ball away from himself, where he then puts in a right-footed curler, which the keeper palmed over. A little bit more to the right-hand side, and that's making the keeper properly work, and I dare say potentially could get in goal. That's the kind of stuff that he's capable of. What I would say, though, more than anything else, is that he has to be able to make sure that he doesn't get too frustrated at times, because there was times in the first half where I felt he was maybe kicking his own arse a little bit too much. And I think that that's maybe just a young, youthful mentality of, I want to do more, and he's got the appetite for it. And it's going to come good for him in the game at some point.
He is harsh on himself. You can see that, you're right. He is really harsh on himself.
Do you know what? I've seen it in Tav. I've seen it in Morelos. I can see it in other players. And I get it, but he's too talented to allow himself to get down, because he is going to make the difference. And when he did score in the game, when he eventually did score, I think everybody unilaterally said he massively deserves that. And I wish he told himself that when he eventually got the goal and stuff. So in terms of what he brings to the team, I think he's a critical component of it. Very, very interested to see as to how he played that role on Saturday, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. We kind of give him that opportunity to go and manage the game as he sees fit and make the difference, which he absolutely can do. So therefore, I'd like to be able to make sure that if we're worst case scenario, if we lose him, that we're going to bring in somebody of really sincere quality, because that is going to be a massive, massive hole for us if we end up having to sell him.
Totally agree. I just think he's a super player, but he is happy. This is not
for
somebody.
Sure.
I think we all can be growing up about it. Alfredo is looking now. I think he's head at his next club, to be honest. But I really don't believe that to be the case at all with Ryan Kent. So, with no need to sell him, he's under contract. If Leeds come or anyone else comes with a ridiculous bid, then okay, I think grudgingly we accept it. But the fees that have been mentioned so far ain't touching the sides for me at this point. James, a surprise call-up was Brandon Barker, a guy who's taken, let's be honest, a power of criticism and jokes over the last few weeks, and I thought he played well. I thought that he never hid. Firstly, he was always looking to get on the ball and try and make things happen. One really nice touch in the first half ended up with a cross for Kemar was being blocked. And then the second half, he was constantly driving at them, was involved in the second goal. And the manager spoke after the game about if you can get him and Kent firing, then it means they can't put three men on Ryan Kent, which we see a lot. It means that they've got concern from the other side. And I thought it was a decent display from Brandon Barker.
It was a lot better than what the vast majority thought he was going to put in. I think there was a perception that Brandon Barker is almost like this the project of the manager, but clearly he ended this place off the back of, from what people have said, was a good midweek performance in the friendly against Plymouth. And it showed, actually, because I think there's a bit more hunger in his game now, because I think he maybe understands more in terms of what his role needs to be. He is someone that is going to use his speed to kind of go down both flanks. He's very capable of that. But what he was beginning to do was he's beginning to show a bit of creative spark along with that as well, in terms of passing the ball, finding the right balls to play, and he's involved in the second goal, as you say. So there is a lot more to offer, I think, from his point of view. And had Joe Aribo been fit, I'm sure that he would have been someone that probably would have been in place there. But sometimes a game requires a player like Brandon Barker over a Joe Aribo in that position. And it's good to be able to have that option, to know that he's someone that's going in and put in a shift. But for fuck's sake, just shave your head, admit it, and just get the Barnett away. I'm convinced he'll get all Alan Hutton and become a better player as a result of it. Just shave your head, do it now, get over it.
Well, as a baldy, then obviously I would say to him, but I didn't go bald at his age. It's a lot easier to be my age and accept it than his. But yeah, I'm sure that's an option for him. But a really good display and encouraging, and as James mentioned there, it's options, more options, more options. That's what we need. The more options we've got, more attacking. Joe Aribo to come back in is pretty exciting. Roof settling in, and beginning to as I say, link up well with him in the second half. The manager spoke about a link up, and I'm thinking, great, 2 up front, brilliant. This is more like it. Now, Cammy, let's not though, when we're praising the front line, let's not forget the record equalling performance of the Rangers back line. 5 clean sheets to kick off a season, the first time since 1929-30. Remarkable, really. And we've only conceded 5 shots on target this season, one of which was from the halfway line, or inside his own half against Livingston. The defence has been playing really superbly. And we talked about changes to the side. I think an interesting one was a change that wasn't made, which was John McLaughlin retained his place. Alan McGregor, afterwards, had only had 2 full sessions with the team, so the manager said he felt that there was no need to rush him back in. But John McLaughlin is not doing anything wrong at the moment. Although for me, I suppose I always think of Alan McGregor as the number 1, but there might be a decision to be made there when Alan McGregor becomes, fully fit, which you'd imagine would happen this week.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of went on record as saying I think McLaughlin could be potentially put in the bracket of our best signing so far of the season, because he's come in and not missed a beat. And I think that when you talk about that, you talk about, historically you think of your keeper and the 4 defenders in front of him, but obviously our style of play, if you were to then say that your 4 defenders have equal responsibility of 25% apiece, we actually know in our style of play that's far more likely to be more heavily weighted towards the central defenders, because our fullbacks are predominantly going forward. What I will say though is I think that Tav has started to be able to cover his area well, and Borna, when he's got the ball, see when Borna's got the ball in his own corner, and he did this a couple of times against Kelly. Typically, you would expect him just to launch it up the park and try and get rid of it or whatever if he's in close quarters. Whereas he just puts it to one side of the guy and then just strips him for pace. And within an area of about maybe 15 to 20 yards, we've turned a quite tight, compact area into a massive wide open space as Borna can then come forward with the ball. Kelly obviously won't, and the vast majority of our domestic opponents won't commit lots of guys up front. So all of a sudden he can then roam forward, go into their half, and then we're on another attack. But absolute kudos to Goldson and Helander. Helander in particular, I think, having come back in from such a layoff. This wasn't COVID determined. This was, again, injury recovery. So even if we had been playing games throughout the necessary break, Helander wouldn't have been playing anyway. But to come back and look as cool and calm and composed as he is, the guy, I think we've got a real superstar here, David. I really, really genuinely do. I thought that when we bought him, and he was obviously had these injury difficulties, but at the press conference that you were at on Friday, when we were talking about the questions put to Goldson about what's that like, he's like, playing alongside him is just, he's cool. and he so is. The way how he comes out with things is absolutely fantastic. He was in consideration for me as a man of the match on Saturday.
He wears Yeezys, but like a lot of the young
folk.
Well,
then sell him, get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Put him in with the Kent. Put him in with the Kent deal, get rid of him.
Yeah, like the youngsters today, they do that with their Yeezys and their rap music and all the rest of it. But I'm just an old fuddy-duddy hermit who lives in Ayrshire, so what do I know? But no, he's been excellent, and all three centre backs we've used this season, James, have been terrific. And I'd asked the manager at press conference last week about the two holding midfielders, the need, why he feels he needs them, and he said, and he spoke about it again on Saturday, it's because we want our full backs basically in the opposition half all the time, so we need that cover, and that, to be fair, there is a defensive solidity. I often speak about being a child of the 80s, the soonest revolution, you build from the back.
Yeah, and it's working, so you can't turn around and say, there's a problem there, because what he's doing is making sense and it is working for the team. I think that if you were to ask me, what's the kind of main defensive partnership at the moment, Connor Goldson is absolutely in there, but then I think either Helander or Balogun, either would be absolutely fine. I wouldn't have a problem with either of them being in the team on any given match day, to be honest. I think Helander has shown, particularly the last couple of games when he's been in, he is quicker than maybe what people think. We maybe assume that Helander's this kind of sort of, he's more, out and out defender, whereas Balogun's maybe a bit more athletic. We've seen a couple of times that Helander's ran back, tracked back, and put in challenges when he's needed to, and he is good at that as well. So they're both international defenders. They're both really, really solid. And whoever plays alongside Connor Goldson, I think, works absolutely fine. So it's a fantastic position to be in that respect.
Yeah, I really like the look of the structure of the defence at the moment. I suppose it's just frustrating when you're playing a team like Livingston and they don't have any guys really heading to attack you that you think, well, could we afford to lose a midfielder in there perhaps for a forward? But certainly in the majority of games, you can kind of see, go on, sorry.
I think that's less about then, what the defenders are doing. It's more about which one of the midfielders who are holding, what can they do that offers more in that scenario then? Does it need to be two guys like this? Is why there's been the criticism of Jack and Kemar, is because they're both doing quite a similar job. And the problem we had with Livingston was we didn't need both of them doing that job, but neither of them seemingly have the capacity when playing for us to offer something extra. It's why people have talked about, could Joe Aribo play in that position? Could he then, advance more if need be? Is that where we need to recruit in terms of bringing in someone who's a bit more box to box, who can offer that role in terms of protecting, but when need be can drive forward, can play passes, can do that extra little bit? That's where the frustration comes in terms of the midfield, I think.
Now, speaking of frustration, Cammy, one thing that has been noticed and discussed and certainly flagged up a lot to us over at Heart and Tivers was that last week there was an awful lot of negativity swirling around the Rangers support. And to be fair, there were certainly reasons for it. We dropped 2 points at Livingston. We had these horrendous stories coming out about the kit. But it really did seem incredibly negative, and it got me wondering about the factors behind that. Now, I'm just going to throw a few out there, and I want to know what you both think of how reasonable they are as factors that need to be taken into consideration. The first things first is 2020 has been a really weird and challenging year for all of us, lockdown, COVID, etc., etc. So you've got that. First of all, people in their day-to-day lives are having issues. Secondly, people can't get into the games, which is a source of huge frustration. Thirdly, we're absolutely desperate for success. We're incredibly desperate for success. But fourthly was something that was put forward to me by my friend Tom, and he says we also have a bit of PTSD from the last decade, and it won't be lifted until we are the champions again. What are your thoughts, Cammy, on first of all the reaction, and then those factors perhaps as being mitigating factors?
I think it's difficult at the moment, given for the first time in kind of our generation, David, and in terms of I kind of put you and I in that bracket. That when we've had challenging periods in our history, we didn't have things like social media at that time, where it was easy to be able to kind of air that, and you kind of you maybe went back to like things like before social media. You talk about things like message board forums and all of that kind of thing as well, which are your kind of main kind of go to acid test, if you want, in terms of where the kind of support was and stuff. And it's difficult, right? Because people will be aggrieved about what's going on, and they will be pissed off that games are being played, they can't get into them. It just feels to me as if there's a real atmosphere at the moment that things are either brilliant or they're shit. And it's one or the other. It can't be both. And despite, as you say, a kind of record-beating start to the season in terms of where we're at, we drop points to Livingston, and all of a sudden it's baby bathwater time. And that's where it just feels to me as a little bit that with all the factors that you mentioned, what should be really, really important at this point in time, especially if you've got any kind of online presence, whether you're on Twitter or whether or not you're doing anything else as well, is, do you know what, take a breath. Just try and remain calm and remain a bit patient, because all I feel at the moment is that there's all this pressure on us to stop 10. And Clive Tildesley, who, by the way, was superb again in commentary and RTV, as was the RTV coverage. And I didn't want to do today's show without mentioning that. So well done to everyone at Rangers and the TV production team there as well. But Clive Tildesley's got it totally right. It's not about stopping 10. It's about getting number 55. And I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the game back, David, because obviously you were there. But
I have, yeah.
Yeah, when you hear that, you kind of get a wee bit of battle fever. Do you know what I mean? Because he's saying, we should be doing this and we should. And if he's coming in and he's understanding that, then I would like our support to try and remember it. All we can do is focus on ourselves, and we need to be able to focus on our successes and where we're being able to do this. We're talking now at the moment that, yes, our squad, or our first 11, shall we say, could have some key players taken out of it to the tune of 35 to 40 million pounds. Now, if you want to go back 5 years ago, could you imagine that we would have got to here in such a short space of time? So, yes, we've had a shit journey, but my God, the recovery is moving at a swift pace, and people need to remember that. But I think all I can really say is, I don't know if it's one thing. I think it is a number of different factors that you mentioned. I just wish people would be a little bit more patient and just take a breath and think, do you know what? Maybe there's bigger issues here. Maybe there's bigger things that I can focus on. And social media is a great place to go and, air those pieces of discontent. But just think about, actually, how do I want to come across here and what do I want to do? And if you're just going to moan constantly, how are you going to change the narrative? How's that going to work? So I think we kind of need to do that a bit more collectively.
I think I always just think, other Rangers fans are not your enemy. They want exactly what you want, and they're hurting at the lack of success too. So I think that I can kind of understand that. And I think, it is difficult when there is this, what feels like unremitting negativity at times, because we're going to drop points, James, this season. Unfortunately, there are times we're going to drop points, and it's how we deal with it and how we recover and how we move on.
Yeah, we can't allow ourselves to get that wound up every time we drop points. That's not sustainable. We can be annoyed, absolutely, but what we had in the last week, going online and having these kind of discussions with Rangers, it wasn't fun. It wasn't nice being able to go on and looking at this and seeing all the different arguments and it getting a lot more visceral, I think, despite the fact that it's actually been a really, really good start to the season. And things are looking a lot better early on than what they maybe did last season, for example. We're looking in really good shape. But one poor result and all of a sudden things are feeling a lot different. Now I get that we're still maybe wanting the performance on the park to kind of be at a level where we think it should be at.
Yeah, 100%. That performance level, I thought it was showing signs of getting there at the weekend, but I don't think we've really had a game so far this season where you say, yeah, we were brilliant from start to finish.
No, that's not happened yet. But name me a team that is able to do that so early on in the season where they can put in a performance at that level. It's so rare that happens anyway. But this season for so many of us is so important for reasons we all know about. And so it has to be perfect from the get-go for so many of us. And if there's any sign that there's going to be a slight chink in that armour, then that's a problem, and it's hard to deal with. And then when you've got the things like we've talked about before in terms of Castore and whatnot as well, people are going to moan, and they're moaning because they can't get into games at Ibrox at the moment, and they're moaning because they can't have a regular life routine that they're so used to for things that are just totally out with their control. But perspective, and it's easy for people to turn around and say, let's have perspective and whatnot, because everyone is feeling different at the moment. There's no one single way that we're all feeling. But it's not as bad as what last week suggests. It's far from it. It's far from it. So I think when the team are winning and when things are going well, we should feel a lot happier about how things are, because it is good and it is something to be happy about.
Of course, just win the fucking league and that'll solve a lot of problems.
I'll take that.
Yeah. We are solutions focused. We are the type of people who like to come up with something. So do that, and I think we'll get there. Cammy, can't wrap up this week without qualified ref hat on, if you please. Kevin Clancy at the weekend, for it was he again. The Cedric Itten booking. I mean, 3 letters: W, T, and F.
Yeah, I'm almost. In fact, no, I'm not even close to getting calmed down as a result of that. Yes, Kevin Clancy will do everything that he possibly can to ensure that he'll do whatever he can to make sure that Rangers will have as tough a game as possible. Has been able to make sure that we've been cheated out of things previously. The Itten booking defies belief. I have no idea what it is, and I know that we're in a spot where we can't moan about referees, but in fairness though, David, we have to be able to talk about these things, because if you do it when you've dropped points, it's going to seem like sour grapes. So I would rather talk about it when we've won the game in spite of the referee. And I use that phraseology deliberately. We won in spite of Kevin Clancy, because it wasn't just the Itten booking. Brandon Barker get wiped out in a tackle, which is ridiculous.
He wouldn't give us a free kick because
he wouldn't give us a free kick. Yeah, and if you look at the percentage of possession versus the percentage of foul, they don't add up. They are completely reversed. Because although we had the majority of the possession, we also made the majority of the fouls. I don't quite understand how that works. But again, until there is an overhaul of officiating in this country, I'm still of the belief that it's very, very easy to give fouls against Rangers, especially if you're Kevin Clancy. The Itten booking was an absolute disgrace, and whilst I'm not even sure now, because the SFA just make up as they go along as to whether or not we can appeal yellow cards, I think the club cannot turn a blind eye to these kind of things this early on in the season, because it cost us having Alfredo Morelos involved within things, and that's probably why Clancy was pissed off, because he was probably all het up and bothered about getting the opportunity to book Morelos. Then he finds out he's not even in the squad, and he's so pissed off about it, he decides that he's going to try and ruin the game whichever way he could. There's a great tactic, a great picture going around the internet at the moment of Alfredo has put up a picture of his daughter, and his daughter is a spitting image, and it's just Kevin Clancy booking her for no reason other than just appearing in a photograph, which is probably true. Until there's an overhaul of what Rangers have to continue the agenda with this, I would hope someone at Rangers turns around and said, we want to understand how he saw that as a booking. And we need to start, even if it's not going to change the decision, because if you start to rack these up and you don't question them, because by sure Celtic would have, if you don't start to put that into the conversation, it's going to continue and it's going to continue. And then we're going to eventually get to a run of games where we've got suspensions for yellow cards that are not yellow cards. We absolutely have to come out with these kind of things, because we've been victim of it in the past, David. So as far as I'm concerned, the club need to maintain a narrative around officiating which is fit for purpose in this country. If you're going to talk about £40 million worth of talent across 2 players in your league, just 2, then the refereeing has to be up to a standard which has to try and match where that is, and that's just 2 players out of how many. And It really, really disheartens me. And it does make me question, are we talking about incompetence or are we talking about something else?
It's a bit of a change for you. Normally you're like, anyway, well, let's hope we're not talking about it much. I don't want to spend the season talking about this shit, to be honest. I'd rather just talk about the football.
So I would too, but then at the same point, I hate to say this as a referee, but the referees are part of the game. And I'm not going as far, by the way, to don't tar me with this brush as saying they're the most important guy in the field, because they're absolutely not. I've never believed that in my life. But they are part of the game. And if we're not going to raise the standard, then that to me is unacceptable. So what is the SFA doing about this? Why is the SFA not looking at incidents like that as part of a referee's review and holding Clancy to account by saying, tell me why you think that's a yellow card, and put him up to have to explain that? Because right now I don't think that any of that will happen. So why not get away with it if we can get away with it?
No, don't disagree with that. I think that's all fair and legit. Right, folks, that'll do us then for this week on Heart and Hand, although Cammy will be back on Thursday with a look ahead to the Hamilton match in Heart and Hand Extra. So he's currently having to stay away from everybody because he was off on holiday last week, so he's got no excuses for missing this week. But but he will be back on Thursday. But of course, if you'd like to hear more from us, there's loads and loads of great content over at our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/heart and hand, where from just $1.99 per month.com, where from just $1.99 per month, you will get up to 5 shows every single day, everything you could ever possibly want about Rangers, not just current events, but historical looks, tactical looks, you name it, we've got it. So go and check it out. If you don't like it, it costs you £2. If you do like it, and a lot of people do, then you'll have a great time. So thank you to our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to my 2 guests today. First of all, the splendid Cammy Bell.
A pleasure as always. Thank you, gentlemen.
The wonderful James Forrest.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Cammy.
I'll be back here next Monday, hopefully celebrating 3 points at Hamilton. Until then, have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.